Hi, this is Tom for PokerVIP.com, and this is part 3 of my series on pot limit Omaha at Betfair. So, same format as before, we're playing two tables of 10 cent, 20 cent pot limit Omaha. You can see on the right hand table we're significantly deeper than we are on the left hand table. It's taken me a little bit of time to get two tables running, so we're playing a little bit on the right hand table, and we've built a stack up. So that's going to change the dynamics on that table somewhat. Obviously, deeper stacked. A couple of our opponents are reasonably stacked as well. Annoyingly, they are to the left of us. But it does mean we're going to have situations post-flop which are going to have slightly different stacked pot considerations if we happen to tangle with those deeper stacks. So that is something that be a bit of a different dynamic, it should be interesting and something new that we didn't see in the previous two videos. So yeah, let's jump on in and see if we can find some interesting spots, make some money, find spots that require us to really think through ranges and opponents' actions and just generally illustrate what we should be doing at stakes such as these. So as before, we're just going to be folding the kind of junky elements of our range. We're not really looking to play out of position. We're just going to be playing a very value-heavy exploitative style as before. That's not to say it's completely imbalanced, but it's not going to be anything like as balanced as a GTO style, which we would be only really playing at higher stakes, such as PLO 100, potentially some PLO 50 tables, very much dependent on the lineup. But at a stake such as this, there's no real benefit to playing such a balanced style, and an exploitative style is in general going to be more profitable. So left hand table, if we had diamonds to the ace, we would be considering raising. As is, we're not going to play it. One thing that I didn't mention in the first few videos, which I probably should have done, is that at Betfair you can play with a HUD. It is compatible with Hold'em Manager, with Poker Tracker. It's just for the purpose of these videos. I'm not playing with a HUD. I think it makes the video look cluttered, a bit confusing. And it also is kind of illustrating that you can beat these games very comfortably if you don't have the tracking software, and that HUD, while useful, is not something that's absolutely essential here. And it's something I think in general players are far too over-reliant on. If you're facing a decision, we should really be making that decision based on the fundamentals, the grounding we have in the game, rather than any statistical representation on the HUD. It can certainly help us in some of the more marginal spots, and it's very useful for identifying outliers. There are people at these stakes that are playing 70 VPIP, and it's useful to have that illustrated. But you can also color code, which I've done with some people. If you just left-hand click, there are your colors, you can make notes. So yeah, color coding in general, very helpful, no matter what stakes you're playing. I played less than 1,000 hands at this site, so the color codings are very much a work in progress. But there's a few that I've tagged, and that's just, again, kind of like a helpful just guide. You know, when you first sit down at a table, a cursory glance tells you what type of player you're going to be playing and what you are likely to expect from them. Tens on the left-hand table. Preferably they'd be a bit more connected than this. We get raised by fairly short stack. I still think we call. The presence of the overcaller gives us a better price, and we do have a nut suit to go along with it. We can make some straights. This is a board we are just going to be check folding. Hits the initial raiser's range. Shouldn't be too many falls in anyone's range, although JM plays a very, very loose style, so it's conceivable he can show up with just about any junk. So of the three of us, he's most likely to have a four. And we're going to be folding the king-queen on the right-hand table. It just doesn't flop particularly well. And we're going to be continuing our plan, just take tens to showdown. If they happen to be good, fantastic. We're never able to extract any value from them. And our plan is very much just to check down and pray. I don't think we get much to fold. Certainly not a king. Opponent bets a tiny sizing. Sure, you're welcome to it, buddy. So many draws come in. Could even be value betting a weak king, which he finally believes is good. Either way, my 10s are not going to contest it. And the weak jack, again, pretty easy fold. Left-hand table, we have a weakish ace. It's certainly a raise-on button. Any action happens before it changes the dynamic. We do have a nut suit. It is connected to some degrees. As is, we're going to open on the button. If the short stack 3-bets us, I think this plays poorly enough versus 3-bets, we can just fold. And I'm going to be ISOing on the right-hand table with my kings against a reasonably short stack. His cutoff range is reasonably wide. Get led into for min. I guess we defend our deuce and fold to any further aggression, try and hit trips, try and hit ace-deuce. Pretty disappointing flop for the kings. That being said, we've altered stacked pot to such an extent that we likely want to go with it anyway. We do have a backdoor flush draw, which is certainly helpful here. Backdoor straight draws. So we're just going to put the money in, and we're going to be up against some 2-pairs, some big draws, but I hate the min raise. I think that's a mistake on his part, as is we just close our eyes and hope we're good. He has kings as well, and hits 2-pair, which is a little frustrating. That's a hand that really he should have got in pre, given his stack size. I have no idea why he didn't. Hand plays far better as a 4-bet than it does as a call. He happened to river, that's fine. Just going to overlimp the queens. If I'd seen this big blind stack, I would probably have ISO'd actually. As is, we are going to be firing flop. Misses our opponent's decent chunk of the time. We're very likely to have the best hand. And there's no real turns and rivers that's going to make our hand that much better that we're happy about it, with the notable exception of that one, which is, as turn cards go, a pretty good one. We're just going to continue betting. I think checking allows our opponent to play more optimally. We want him to chase with his draws. We want him to overplay pairs. We're looking to maximize any mistakes he makes to the full financial value. Flush doesn't get there. The gut shots don't get there. We're just going to bet and hope that our opponent gets stubborn with hands such as kings, although that's very unlikely given action. Potentially a poorly played 3, that kind of stuff. And he folds. Given the run out, that's not hugely surprising. But we got 2 streets. It's far from the worst result. So we really haven't had many spots on the left-hand table. Hopefully that can change in the next 20 minutes or so. One thing that I mentioned in previous videos that seems to be particularly prevalent again, and a common theme, is the number of limps that are happening. It's maybe to more of an extreme on these 2 tables than it has been previously, but it is something that is very noticeable in these games versus, for example, the 25 zoom pool on stars. And that's generally just going to mean a more passive game, a weaker game, and long-term a more profitable game for a good player's playing. Going to be folding the queens when ISO'd. Sorry, the raggedy queen when ISO'd. That the opponent is limp folding out of the gun is pretty awful and would instantly get my suspicion up that he's not the most competent player in the world. The Finnish player seems to be very aggressive. Given the sheer amount of passiveness on the table, that's probably not a terrible strategy. As long as you can rein it in the times you get played back at. For passive players playing back at you, it is almost certainly going to be a nut hand. Tens out of position versus the half stacker, we're just going to be folding. In position we can consider calling, but out of position, it's not going to flop well enough to make a particularly profitable call. We're going to be just clicking here and raising the limper so we can take initiative. I'm going to be opening here. Flopping 2-pair is far from the worst result. We're just going to be betting for value at this point. Don't really need to go more than 2/3. We have a backdoor flush draw as well. Queen Jack gets there, which is the most obvious hand. We do cap range by checking, but I feel betting we're never getting a hand that is worse to call. So we're just going to check back. Getting 3-bet here is somewhat unfortunate. The hand doesn't play super well. It is double suited, however. If this was single suited or rainbow, we would never be calling on the left-hand table. As is, I guess we peel and call here. Going to be fatly betting on the right-hand table. This is one of the issues with the hand. Frankly, if our opponent is potting here, he almost certainly has better ace. Our kicker plays particularly badly. The 2 flushes have come off that actually don't help us, so we're going to be making a disciplined fold there. We only really have a gut shot. I'm not really convinced my opponent has 3 aces, but hands such as ace queen, ace king still has very noticeable equity versus me. Apology for the tongue-tiedness of that sentence. Just going to be overlimping here and checking through, and four-handed I'm going to be opening the moderately connected jack. On a board such as this on the left-hand table, as we fold the 8, we are going to be checking. I think hand plays far better as a check call than anything else. We don't want to get money in versus a 9 at this point. So pot controlling when we have a reasonable amount of equity is fine. So that is what we're going to do. Our kicker is obviously not fantastic with the jack anyway. So we're just going to check and evaluate what action occurs. If we happen to improve, we can take it from there. When it actually goes bet call, there's a very good argument for folding here. We're unlikely to have the best flush draw. We have the lower end of the straight draw. So in terms of getting coolered, it's quite likely we can be on the wrong end when we hit a flush, and that's not including a draw, sorry, and that's not even including the times that we're versus a 9. So we're just going to be folding there. If Samu hadn't called, it becomes a far better spot to call, but it's just going to be a spot that we find ourselves in a lot of tricky spots. Chasing non-nut straights, chasing non-nut flushes on a paired board doesn't sound like a great idea. Beautiful Broadway hand. Going to be opening. And folding the Raggy King. Flopping top pair and NFD. The only real downside is I have 3 clubs rather than 2. It does remove one of my outs, but we are still going to be betting here. We want worse flush draws to chase and commit. We have reasonable equity against 2-pair, although they're very unlikely. We want hands like ace 4-5 to chase. We have some of their outs covered, and we have an equity advantage against them anyway. So all in all, unless our opponent's on the really kind of wacky end of range, we're doing pretty well there. We're going to be folding the ace to 10 when we have no nutted suit combos there. And folding the very low connectors. Again, we're not drawing enough flushes. Going to make the weak end of straights, and we're out of position. And one concept we really need to consider is the earlier the position we are, the more likely the hand is going to go multi-way. So we really want to be playing hands that have nutted potential. So low pairs, low rundowns, low suitedness is going to be leaning to us being in a lot of spots that have reverse implied odds. And especially when we're taking the hand 3-way, 4-way, it's just going to lead to us getting ourselves in a lot of tricky spots where if we hit our flush, we can't extract value because it's too weak. And if our opponent has a higher flush, we're going to be in a bit of a spot as to how many streets to call before we decide to give up on the pot. So it's just going to lead to us having a pretty negative expectation there long term. Left-hand table, it's probably just about a raise. If this were the ace of clubs, it would be a slam dunk raise. As is, I think we can raise and fold to 3 bets. Flopping a weak gut shot and a weak flush. Getting led into. It's a weird lead, truthfully. But it's a very difficult board for him to be just naked bluffing on. Given I make the lowest straight with a 6 and a weak flush draw, I'm actually just going to be folding and completely ignoring the spot. As tight as that looks, I do believe it's going to be correct long term. The 5 dangler significantly detracts from this hand, but I still think it's an open in this spot. Weird limp. Going to be folding once ISO'd. We would more than likely be folding anyway, even versus a limp, given how absolutely terrible the hand is on the right-hand table. Left-hand table, the fact this is going three-way, potentially four-way, is not ideal. Apparently my raises are getting very limited amounts of respect. As such, I think we're going to start adjusting as to what we are going to be opening and not. Hands like this are going to play much, much better in heads-up spot. Felt raising in the cutoff, we were more than likely going to get the hand heads up. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Brian seems to be very passive, calling far too many hands, playing far too high a VPIP. And Sammy seems to be pretty loose, throwing in some 3-bets, playing aggressively. So we're just going to tighten our range up a bit against these two people. If we had position versus either of them, we could start exploiting them pretty heavily. But when we're out of position, I think we just tighten up, give them fewer opportunities to overcall and make our lives difficult. With Jack high, we can't really do much but check fold. It's weird that it's got to check round, but truthfully, I can't rep anything really, other than, I don't know, potentially a pair of kings that didn't bet flop for reasons known only to themselves. So we're just going to be checking here. Like theoretically, on a jack or a 10, I'm white to be good. Going to take showdown with the 8. There's a very slim chance I'm good. I don't get better to fold, so sure. The 8's good. Happy times. That my opponent's playing deuces here. I guess it was against a very short stack, but still. So Carla's actually rebought, so changes the dynamic of the table. Although Dragon is now quite short, so yeah. Still with a short stack on the table, I guess. Rainbow Ace Jack, we're going to be folding. Not really sure why my opponent is pot sizing here. I guess with his stack considerations, it's not terrible. It's not the greatest spot to get it in, though, given the clubs out there. Questionable. Back to the limping on the right-hand table. WDX plays very, very loose, so if I have opportunities to ISO him, I will be. But when we're under the gun +1 and have, frankly, an atrocious hand, we're not going to be playing it. And likewise, Brian's getting ISO'd again. Samu's entirely reasonable in doing so. It's definitely going to be a profitable spot for him long term. Not really sure why he ever needs to pot in this spot. You'd think 2/3, even half, is going to get the job done just as readily. Although there's potentially some history there that we're not aware of. And folding again. And it's kind of, I guess, to an outsider, as boring as it appears to just be folding, our weakish hands. It's by far and away a more long-term profitable option than playing these weak hands, especially when we happen to be out of position. And it's going to be part of the way that we build a large win rate at these stakes is just not playing the hands that get us in trouble, that trap us, that give us the hands that are weak and have reverse implied odds. So we're just going to be, playing disciplined and just ignoring those spots, really, which a lot of people at these stakes do not do, and that's one of their biggest leaks. Just getting a call here. Given the amount of three betting he did, the dream would have been to be three bet, but you know, kind of everything. Aces with backdoor flush draw. We are going to be betting on this board and just picking up. As I said, there's no need to pot in spots like that. Doesn't really achieve much, and why risk more money for a negligible return? Going to be opening the nines. I think this is just about okay on cutoff. Any earlier, it's a bit loose, but it's reasonable here. Get three bet again. The hand does have a reasonable connectivity, so I will be defending. That's not a bad flop. Really small sizing. We are going to be raising here for fairly obvious reasons. I cannot let someone bet this small sizing and attempt to try and take showdown, so we're going to alter the stack to pot ratio in our favor. We have a hand that doesn't really want to see turns and rivers, just because how can it really improve? Barring a boat, which isn't going to happen too often. I don't need to pot. I think potting screams strength. I want to bet a sizing that it looks like I could conceivably be just attacking his weak sizing and capable of folding to a jam. So this is one of the spots at this limit that I would be introducing a bit of balance in my range. I think potting is just going to scream strength. I don't need to do it. Again, 4.5, if he has a decent hand, he's going to be jamming over it anyway. And I've better sizing that alters the stack to pot ratio sufficiently that we can get money in on turn if he calls that sizing anyway. So it achieves everything that the pot size does for a smaller cost. The kings. I think raising four people that limped when we're out of position is just going to equal four calls and us playing it out of position. So we're just going to be playing it passively and try and get the value if we happen to hit a king, which we have not managed to do. Let's defend the jacks and see what happens. The answer is not a great deal. Folding kings on a nice side board. Do have a gut shot here. That's about it. I expect his queens to have bet. He could conceivably have some weird two pairs on this sixth turn. He can pick up diamonds as well. I guess we make a loose defend and see what he does on still on river. I think he checks back most hands that we beat at this point. I don't think he has a huge number of bluffs. If he does, they're the 8-7 type bluffs. And the jacks are good, which is nice. Always nice to be right. And folding versus the isolation on the left-hand table. Pretty nice hand on the right-hand table. This is a hand we are going to be raising even versus three limps. It flops well enough. I would much prefer we had the nutted spades than the queen high spades, but still. It's a very interesting spot now that we've had an isolation. I think given the fact that he's raising under the gun +1 and expects action behind, I'm probably just calling. Hypothetically, if cutoff had done it, we can definitely attack it. But I'm actually going to give the under the gun +1 isolation a bit of respect. Hand still plays well enough and hits enough flops that we can play it as a call. Limp raising, pretty awful. Pretty much screams you have aces. My hand contains an ace. It's not going to play well versus aces. Pretty easy fold for me. If your opponent's going to ISO, he's probably going to be three betting anyway, so he would have built the pot to a larger size, allowing your four bet to be larger. As is, you've made an absolute hash of it. I don't understand the min bet call at all. Okay, I don't even want to know what the hell just happened there. Well, microstakes do confuse you every once in a while, and that is very confusing. All right, we're going to be raising the aces. Let's try and isolate. If we get played back at, it's fine. Okay, flopping the ace-3, we lose exclusively to 6-3. So we don't really need to go much bigger than 5, I think. It's going to achieve everything that larger sizing does anyway. We have the backdoor flush draw. I mean, that's a weird sizing. I mean, I guess, to be honest, I flop second nuts in this spot. If you have 6-3, mazel tov, I guess. Same hand. Sure. Oh, I make a full house. Nice. That's always nice. Nice little pot that way. Didn't even consider the backdoor full house outs. Oh well. Run a boat, never a bad thing. Casual 350 big blind plus stack. Never going to be upset about that. Just going to be folding the king, I think, here. And let's take a flop. See what happens. Two pair is it's okay, but we have no redraw with it, other than a very weak backdoor flush draw. We're going to call it bet into if checked, we're just going to bet, and I guess conceivably fold to the check raises that happen once in a blue moon, but are nutted every time they happen. I'm actually going to be folding my really weak deuces. Don't need to play that out of position. You can have my one big blind. I can afford it. That's a problem. Hits just about every part of his check calling range. Don't really see any reason to bet. The only thing I can potentially get to fold is, other than hands that beat me, is potentially, I don't know, Jack 8. I mean, such a small part of range. Let's just check. And I mean, if this goes to showdown, maybe I win, but he's going to have so much Queen X, so much 7X. It's just not an enjoyable run out at all. I could check some Queen X on turn, just as like a bit of a randomizer, so I have a stronger check calling range. Plus, I don't want to potentially build pots against King Queen. So that's something I would do on occasions, not 100% of the time, but enough of the time that this bluff wouldn't work with complete success. But as is, when we have absolute bottom of range, we just fold. I think if my opponent was going to be bluffing, he would have been betting flop more than likely. Tens on the right-hand table versus a fairly short stack. I guess we defend. It's not terrible. It's not brilliant either. There's certainly better hands to defend with. Aces and blockers to straights. The only real problem I have with using them as blockers is my opponent has a fairly low stacked pot. That being said, when check round, I guess we are going to go bet and only really give up on clubs, I think. Or barring some weird raise. And yeah, it just works. That's nice. Sixes and deuces do not connect with this board. Even versus a min bet. I mean, what do I want to turn? It's going to have to be backdoor boat, backdoor quads. That's going to happen infrequently. I've already hit one backdoor boat. I really don't think it's going to happen again in this video, so probably not a good spot to suddenly start getting creative. We fall on the weak king, especially when he's raising a short stack, who's quite likely to play back at him, or quite likely to be getting money in by turn river. He hasn't been 3-betting at all, but he certainly can just basically stack off with any 2-pair combos that he flops, any top pair flush draw combos. Don't really understand why you'd ever size this large here, given it's checked twice. Don't think it really accomplishes that much. And I think as a general like population read, at this limit and limits below this, and potentially even at PLO 50, sizings is something that in general players should really be working on, because it's one of the areas that is probably least understood and also one of the bigger leagues, I think. Connected jacks. Sure, let's do the ISOing thing. Again, someone who's limping close to 100% of range. How the short stack has just overcalled out of position, I will never understand. That is a colossally bad mistake, but sure. Samu, that's such a needly race. So I basically have the choice of shoving or folding, and this hand is not sufficiently strong to shoving, so sure. I'm going to be betting my top two here with backdoors. He's also 3-betting a player who's almost certainly calling. Should almost certainly be calling. Let's open jacks again. They are stronger jacks, although they lack a suit. Not the world's greatest flop. I said it doesn't really connect with my opponents either. If this were heads up, we'd be betting. As is, I think checking is entirely reasonable. So we're going to play these two hands out as our last hands and move on. I'm going to be folding here. Very weak hand, out of position. And versus a player who has been folding and very, very passive, he suddenly puts. I wonder what he has. Sure, buddy, you win. So, with those two hands done, this being, excuse me, we'll just play the aces then. Why not? That seems like a pretty good hand to end on. Back to the calling. So yeah, this concludes part 3 at the end of this hand. Again, I think we've seen reasonably passive play, quite a few mistakes. Certainly been showing ways and means to exploit those players. So Moo's gone for another small 3-bet. I think with his stack size, you should be potting every time. That's highly questionable. We're just going to be 4-bet getting the money in. There's going to be occasions where we apparently get it in 3-4 way and lose, but sure. Not a fantastic flop, but given what stack to pot is, so little behind, let's go with our aces and gut shot, backdoor flush draw. He can very conceivably hit this range. Uh, 5-6 is going to win, and I'm going to take the side. So basically break even on the spot. Just fine, given it's 3-way and I've only got 1 pair. But it does illustrate just how absolutely bizarre people play in 3-bet spots. Another area that we can exploit when we play these stakes. So with that hand concluded, I have been Tom, PokerVIP, and I will hopefully see you for part 4.